75y to the fourth power. Yes? Yes? Very good. Awesome. So this is an expression. It's not an equation, correct? Okay. So we are asked to do what? What's the question? What are we asked to do? Okay, so we're asked to factor. Very good. So obviously, I have to go through the strategy. Which strategy will I use? The strategy for binomial, trinomial, or polynomial? Excellent. So this is a binomial. Is it in descending order?
Yes.
Good. Greatest common factor.
Y squared.
So y squared indeed.
Would it be 3y squared?
Exactly. Very good. So if you skip any of those steps, you make your life more difficult when it comes to factoring. So that's why I gave you those steps, and they have to be followed in that particular order. Okay, so now 3y squared times what is 75y to the fourth?
25y squared.
25y squared minus. So 3y squared times what is 20? Very good. Multiply minus 9. Very good. So now I'm looking at this, and I continue the steps. No negative leading coefficient, special product. I always hope for a special product. Special products are always easy. So is that a special product?
Difference of squares.
Difference of squares. If I say difference of squares, then I have to prepare two binomials. If I say difference of cubes, then I'll prepare binomial times a
Triangle.
excellent. So what are these binomials here? 5y minus 3, awesome. And
5y plus 3.
that's it. So just remember, do not skip any step from the strategy. If you do, you make it more difficult than it is. Is this okay? Very good.
What is this called in a special product?
Special product, difference of squares. Difference of squares. Very good. Anything else you like to ask? Yes, please.
I forgot how to do it.
That's fine.
So it's 3 in parentheses x plus 4 close parentheses to the second power equals 60. How do I break that to become a?
It's a perfect example. That's exactly what I wanted to start with. So what type of equation is this? Excellent. Thank you. You help me. I don't have to look for a problem. Excellent. Did I copy it correctly?
Yes.
Is it 3x squared, quantity x to the x plus 4 squared, x equals excellent. Good. What type of equation is it? We only know 3. We know more than
If
3.
you multiplied it out, it would be a quadratic. wouldn't it?
Exactly, it is. Of course. We only, I shouldn't say only know, we only reviewed 3 types of equations, right?
Linear, actual, and quadratic.
There is nothing else so far. We will add more to it, to the list, but for now, that's all we have. Good. What do you recommend we do first? And I gave you 2 keywords. It should be on your end.
Factoring and simplifying.
Awesome. So which of these 2 I will look at or think of? Say it again. It's already factored. Everything is factored.
Divide 3.
By, exactly. That's the key. The key is to divide both sides by 3. So then what do we have on the left?
X plus 4 squared. equals
And the right-hand side? Indeed. Very good. So now this is a typical situation for which of the methods for quadratic equations? We only know 2 because we haven't got, say it again? Exactly, because we haven't looked at the other 2 just yet. So indeed, it's the taking square roots method. It's already set up like that. It's exactly a typical situation for that. Something with x and squared on one side and a number on the other. So then the left-hand side is x plus 4. It should have been the absolute value. Instead, we write,
Squared.
plus or minus.
That's the key. 2 solutions. That's the reason why I asked from the very beginning. What type of equation is it? You said quadratic, then you have to think of 2 solutions, mandatory. If you only put plus, then you omit the second one. Very good. So now on the side, I know the square root of 20. 20 is not a perfect square, but I can, indeed, 4 times 5. 2 the square root of 5, excellent. So finally, I have one more step, and that one more step would be, very good. There is no need to separate these two solutions because you cannot simplify. So why bother? Is it wrong? And actually, my math lab, I have to be honest, my math lab would probably ask you to use a comma. And why -4 plus 2 to the square root of 5, comma, -4 minus 2 to the square root of 5. But in writing for the test or final exam, there is no need. This is good enough. Now, if there is no square root here, then you have to separate them because you have -4 plus 2 and -4 minus 2. When we move a term from one side to the other, we change its sign. Everybody? This is exactly what I wanted to do.
So that's the x equals -4 plus or minus 2 to the, well, 2 square root of 5. Are we putting plus or minus right there? Or is that?
It's a mandatory. When we take the square root, yes. When we take the square root, I have to put plus or minus. Good. Excellent. So now we're on our way to completing the square.
So all square roots, you have to put plus or minus?
If you solve, if it's an equation, you have to show me the example that you're thinking of. I don't want to say yes before you show me what you're thinking of. If you're thinking of an equation, the answer is yes.
Okay, so if it's an equation and you're taking the square root of it, it's always plus or minus.
Completing the square. This is a third method. And as I was saying, honestly, last time, I said, is this useful? No. We will be asked to use it. Then why? Well, you will see why at the end of chapter 2. So this is a good method for something else. Can we use it to solve a quadratic equation? Partially. Yes. Why partially yes? It alone will not solve a quadratic equation. So after we complete the square, we have to employ a different method that we just discussed, taking square roots. Okay, so here's an example. On page 167, the problems are between 47 and 64. Between 47 and 64 on page 167. And I'm going to choose 48. You can choose the next one. X squared plus 6x equals -8. What is the idea behind completing the square? The idea behind completing the square is that any quadratic equation, like this one, for example, can be presented like this. If I make this equation look like this, which method would I apply to solve it? Taking the square roots, like we just did that, right? So, but the question is, how do I make this into this? That's the question. And what are the steps from this equation to this one? Okay, and here they are. And they are based on what we did on the very first day of classes, those special products. So I'm going to copy the equation here. You don't have to do that. So here are the steps. 4-step procedure. Step number 1, identify the middle coefficient. Can anyone give us the middle coefficient? How much? 6 is the middle coefficient. In step 2, divided by 2. Oops. How much do I get when I divide 6 by 2? Excellent. In step 3, square 3. What do I get when I square 3?
9.
Excellent. Final step, add 9 to both sides in order to complete the square. Okay, let's take a moment and go over the steps one more time. First, I have to make sure that this polynomial is in descending order. because I need to identify the middle coefficient. We identify the middle coefficient as being 6. Then we,
Divide by 2.
good, and then we,
Square it.
the answer, and then we add 9 to both sides. So here's how we write it. I'm adding 9 to this side and 9 to this side. You understand that I cannot add just 9 to one side and forget about the other, because the equation is a balance. If I add 9 pounds here, I have to add 9 pounds here. I can't just say, oh, I'm going to add to one side and forget about the other, correct? Very good, awesome. So then the new equation becomes x squared plus 6x plus 9 equals 9 minus 8, which is?
1.
Good. Now I would like you to tell me what this is.
X plus 3.
Of course, because we factored. We reviewed the entire procedure of factoring. And you know it's a trinomial, it's in descending order. No greatest common factor, no negative leading coefficient, special product. The answer is yes. So now you see that we completed the square. It's a good effort, right, to complete the square. And now what? I haven't solved the equation. So that's why I'm saying completing the square alone will not do the job.
But then you could do square root.
I have to.
Yeah.
I have to. So all this work led to this, but not to the final answer. That's why we look at it taking square roots first and then completing the square. So then the answer will be x plus 3 equals?
1. Plus or minus 1.
Excellent. And then I have x equals negative 3 plus or minus 1. And now I have no choice but to separate them. That is a must. Because I can. Since I can't separate them, I would write negative 3 plus 1, which is
Negative 2.
and negative 3 minus 1, which is
Negative 4.
good. Any questions? Yes, please.
Why did you divide it by 2 at the beginning? Would you just slide everything back down?
Excellent question. Excellent question. Do you have the first handout that we started with? The one with the 3 special products. The very first one that we filled out. The first one with the 3 special products. Here's why. Because of that 2 in the special product. That's why we have to divide by 2. In order to get the third term. Good? Perfect question. Thank you for asking. Good. So let's look at a couple more problems.
Are we doing some similar problems, right?
I'm sorry?
We're doing similar problems, right?
We are still talking about the completing the square. Yeah, we haven't moved on to the next topic.
Okay.
Okay, so let's look at problem 50.
Wait, did you finish the one before?
I'm sorry?
It's x raised to this one.
Okay. So let's look at 54. So this is x squared plus 6x minus 5 equals 0. Since it has the same 6x, let me change it to 52. So this is x squared minus 2x minus 5 equals 0. Because it will be the same thing. We're going to add to the same number to both sides. And what's the point? Okay, middle coefficient.
2.
Divide that by 2.
1.
Please square 1. That's what we add to both sides. At the same time, we will have to move this free term to the other side. So then the new equation becomes this. Of course, plus 1. So we separate this free term. We have to move it to the other side. And the middle coefficient is negative 2. We divide negative 2 by 2. We get negative 1. Negative 1 squared is 1. So that's how we get this number that has to be added to both sides. At the same time, we are moving negative 5 to the other side. It becomes positive 5. Can anyone give us the next step?
You would add it off, but then you're gonna go ahead and put your x. You're gonna figure out what your square is.
Your final.
Equals 6. So dx -1.
Exactly what we figured out. Yes, exactly that number always.
Why did we add by 1 again?
Can anyone explain why we add 1?
Add to the 7th power.
Because we divide.
You took the 2 and you divide it by 2, which is 1, and then you square it, which is still 1. It was -1, right, before. And
Perfect.
then it's
But when you
squared
square it, it's still 1.
to 1. And so then you have to add 1 to both sides.
Very good. These are the 4 steps in completing the square. Everyone with me?
Yeah.
Yes? Any questions? Good. So now what? We complete the square. It's wonderful, beautiful, but I haven't solved yet. What should I do next? Not square, but
Square root.
take the square root. Excellent. So then I have x minus 1.
Plus or minus.
Very good.
6.
Very good. So then the final answer will be this. 1 plus or minus the square root of 6. Any questions on this? Any questions?
That was number 52.
That was number 52. Of course, if the middle term is not divisible by 2, then we're going to encounter a fraction. I think we should look at one. So let's say problem 56. On the same page, 167. So x squared plus 7x minus 8 equals 0. In the past, some of my students said, I would like to move negative 8 to the other side first, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. Let's do that if that's better for you. We can. Or you can do 1 step, 2 steps in one. Okay, what is the middle coefficient?
7.
We divide it by 2.
3.5.
We prefer fractions. 7 halves. So now we square 7 halves. What do we get when we square 7 halves? We square the top and we get
49.
Excellent. Exactly. And this is the number we do what? What do we do with this number?
Add it to both sides.
Excellent. X squared plus 7x plus 49 over 4 equals 8 plus 49 over 4. Please remember, we must add it to both sides.
Okay, one question.
Now we know, yes?
How, now where do you get the 7 over 2? You taking the 2 from the 2 from X from the X?
Step 1, we get 7. In step 2, we get 7 over 2. In step 3, we square to get 49 over 4. In step 4, we add 49 over 4 to both sides. I'm following these 4 steps. Is that better, everyone? Yes? Okay, so now the left-hand side. Very clear, very simple, because we have the number that we squared to get 49 over 4. Yes. So if I had 1, this is minus, I have minus 1. If I had what was this? 9 and I squared 3, then this is x plus. Exactly. Exactly. It's the number that I square, right? Because remember, when I square this, how many terms do I get? When I square a binomial.
Oh,
Exactly, right? So the first term squared plus 2 times the first times the second plus the second term squared. So the number that I square to get this will always be in the binomial. Always. So now I need the least common denominator here, which is, I need to multiply the top by 4. So this is 32 plus 49. 81. So x plus 7 halves squared equals 81 over 4. Exactly. After all this effort, I have to use a different method. And the different method is taking square roots. Any question on this?
So where did we get
Yes?
the 7 over 2? Right before you did the square root property? Where'd that come from?
First handout on the first day of classes.
Yeah.
When I square this, I get 3 terms. The first term squared plus 2 times the first times the second plus the second term squared. 7 halves squared is that. Or what we did in factoring last class. This factors like this. It's in descending order, special product, yes. First term squared, it's a perfect square, perfect square. So I expect this, right? But I check the middle term. 2 times the first times the second is 7x. So if you have this to factor, you will always look at the first term, which is a perfect square. You will always look at the last term, which is a perfect square, and you will expect this, as long as the middle term is identical. And the middle term here will be identical, because 2 times x times 7 over 2 is 7x. So that's how we get this. Is that better? I'm sorry? Sufficient as a number, yes. We didn't finish. So just give me one more second. So this is x plus 7/2 equals?
Plus or minus
9
zero.
over
Excellent. So then x equals negative 7/2 plus or minus 9/2. We need to separate them, and we need to simplify them. So how much is negative 7 plus 9?
2.
Yes, it is 2 divided by 2, which is 1, indeed. So x equals 1. How much is negative 7 minus 9
-16.
divided by 2?
Negative.
Very good. So now this is final. These are the two solutions that we expect. Very good. Any questions for me? Anything you have?
So we don't pay the 2 no matter. Now we're gonna-
This one?
Yeah, we don't pay the 2.
Negative 7 minus 9 is negative 16 divided by 2, which is negative
Oh, you
8.
divided by 2, correct.
Yes, we have to. We can erase any of that. Yep.
Do you
Yes.
mind if we do another fraction?
Yeah, we-
Yeah, that's fine. So let's do another. Let's say 58. So this is x squared minus 3x minus 5 equals 0. Mana, you had a question?
I'll wait till you finish.
So if you want to move 5 to the other side from the beginning, it's the same thing. So negative 3 divided by 2.
Hold on 1 second.
Yes. Bless you. Negative 3 divided by 2. Negative 3 over 2. Let's square negative 3/2. How much?
9/4.
Very good. This is what we have to add to both sides. Now the left-hand side is definitely a perfect square. We made it to be.
X minus 3 over 2.
Exactly. Exactly what we square. X minus 3 over 2. Here we need the least common denominator. Indeed. So this is 29. This is a very important method, as I said, for the end of chapter 2.
Where do we get 29 from? I'm sorry.
I'm sorry?
Where do we get 29 from? I'm sorry. Oh, we get 14
We're
plus
adding-
9.
Yes, yes. So now we take the square root from both sides. X minus 3/2 equals plus or minus the square root of 29 over 2. And in this case, we will not separate. There is no point. Any questions? The last method is the quadratic formula. So now, in summary, we know 4 methods, right? Factoring for quadratic equations. Factoring, taking square roots, completing the square, which is not exactly 100%. Why? Because it alone cannot do the job. And the quadratic formula. Yes, you had a question. Go ahead.
About completing the square.
Mhm.
So I have a problem here. I don't know how to do the square. I got 9. For some reason, I don't know where it comes from.
So what is it?
It's x squared plus 6x equals -5.
Okay,
And
very
then
good.
somehow I get 9 as the plate in the square. And then
Yes, that's what you have to add to both sides. So, because I would like you to stop what you're doing and pay attention. Because we did already 4 problems. I'm fine, but turn that off. Please turn it off. because I'm fine that you're doing your homework in class, but it's not a good idea. I think it's
the 1.5, the one you're doing right now. I
right,
didn't know you were doing it at the second.
right, but I think it's better if you pay attention first. I recommend that. Okay, so how we get 9? So we just had this problem a minute ago with x squared plus 6x equals negative 8. So that's how we got the 9. That's the same thing. Okay, so the middle coefficient is 6. We divide it by 2, we get 3, and that's how we square 3 and we get 9. Because I don't want you to miss anything from the explanation. By doing something else, and I see, what is your name over there? Yes, are you doing something else?
No, I'm working on it.
Okay. I just would like you to pay attention to the explanation so you can participate and ask questions. So middle coefficient is 6, we divide it by 2, we get 3, and we square 3 and we get 9. So that's how we get the 9. These are the 4 steps. 4-step procedure, and that's how we got the 9. The left-hand side is x plus 3, everything squared, and the right-hand side is 4. It's a new equation that Mana was working on. It's something else. Yeah, it's not the quadratic formula yet. I just wrote it before I asked. I should have asked, my fault. I should have asked her to give me the problem before putting the title up there. So this is not a title right this moment. So then we take the square root, and we get x plus 3 equals plus or minus 2, and x will be negative 3 plus or minus 2. That's how we get a negative 5 and the negative 1. And that's how we get the 9. 4-step procedure. So x equals negative 5 and x equals negative 1.
I have one more question.
Yes, please.
Now, can you go back up
Yes.
to that last part?
Yes.
you did
Yes.
With the x equals 3 over 2
Yes.
plus or minus 29 over 2. So that's the answer?
There is nothing else we can do here. This is it.
Right?
You can, the math lab will ask you to separate them and put a comma, but there is no need to separate them on paper. There is no need to separate them on paper. Yes? Mana?
Do we always divide by 2? Or is it 2?
From the special product that we did on the first day of classes. We already answered that question. So that's why please pay attention. I don't mind repeating. I really don't. But we already had that. Doing something else during the presentation puts you behind, it does not help you. That's my opinion. Forgive me if I'm wrong. Yes. Sure.
Trying to write something. No,
Sure.
the one right before that. We had all the steps on it. There you go. You just give me a.
Okay, so let's move on to the quadratic formula, which is the last step. Ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. This is the first step before we even think of the quadratic formula. In other words, what am I saying here? The quadratic expression has to be in descending order. I have to have the equal symbol, and I have to have 0. I have to be able to identify the leading coefficient, the middle coefficient, and the free term, which is c. Now, the quadratic formula works for any equation, any quadratic equation only, of course. And this is it, negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac over 2a. We know this like forever, right? Thank you. So we know this from high school, right? And from other math adventures. So let's take a look at one example with the quadratic formula, like let's say 68. X squared plus 5x plus 2 equals 0.
Same page, right?
Of course. We are still in 1.5. It's a good reminder to put it in. Okay. The polynomial is quadratic. It is in descending order. I have equal symbol and I have 0. I identify A to be 1, B to be
5.
and C to be
2.
excellent. So then I put them slowly and carefully in the quadratic formula. Negative B, I will write negative 5.
Can you skip down just a little bit? Because I'm still writing that.
Negative 5 plus or minus the square root of. Very good, 25. Minus 4ac. 4 times 1 times c is 8 over 2 times 1, which is 2. I'm sure you remember this. 25 minus 8. Very good. So then x equals -5 plus or minus the square root of 17 divided by 2. And there is nothing we can do. This is the final answer, and this is it. That's how we apply the quadratic formula. Any questions? Any questions? I would like to look at a word problem with quadratic functions. On page 169, always remember, if you encounter something in my math lab that you didn't see in class, always bring it to class so we can work on it. Okay, on page 169, let's look at problem 146. A rectangular parking lot has a length that is 3 yards greater than the width. A rectangular parking lot, and they say the length is 3 yards greater than the width. How would you like to denote the length and the width? We normally use x and y, but it doesn't matter. Whatever you want. That's fine. Good. So the length is 3 yards longer than the width. I need to write a statement in mathematical terms, like an equation. Say it again.
No, I was just
Any ideas? It's okay if you're wrong. What would you write? The length is 3 yards longer than the width.
3 yards.
Mhm.
I thought it was 3 times longer.
Say it again. But I have to write an equation. X plus 3 doesn't mean anything.
Y equals x plus 3.
One more time. The
Y.
length.
Y equals
X plus
Let's
3.
look at what we wrote. The length. Give me the length.
I forgot you said that.
Y equals
X is
3 times longer.
what
3
do I
yards longer.
what do I write for is? What does is represent? Very good. So the length
X
is
equals y plus 3.
very good. 3 yards longer than the width. Excellent. Perfect. The area of the parking lot is 180 square yards. The area of the parking lot is 180 square yards. What do I write? How do I determine the area of a rectangular plot or lot?
Length times width.
Very good. X times y equals 180. Very good. Let's read the problem one more time and make sure that we identified equations correctly. A rectangular parking lot has a length that is 3 yards greater than the width. The area of the parking lot is 180 square yards. Find the length and the width. What would you recommend we do first? Any suggestions? Just look at what we have and say,
We could look at the factors of 180.
not yet. What would you do with this? Any suggestions? Well, the distance says x equals y plus 3, and I have x in the second equation. What do you think I'm going to do? Exactly. So I will write y plus 3 multiplied by y equals 180. Awesome. Great. That's exactly what I'm doing. I'm using substitution. I substituted the x in the second equation by the first equation tells me it equals to. Excellent. Thank you. Great. So now what do I do next? Look at this equation and say, I know what this is, and I know what you have to do. I will distribute y squared plus 3y. I will subtract 180. And I have now 4 methods. I have factoring. I have taking square roots. I have completing the square. And I have the quadratic formula. Which one is the, yes?
Why do you put y squared?
Can anyone tell us why we,
Y times y. We distribute the y from y plus 3.
Oh, okay. I see.
whenever you start explaining any of the math or something else that you want to explain to somebody else, you will learn it better. Trust me. One of my best professors ever is a professor at UMBC. His name is Gauda. There is absolutely no class in which you would not step in the middle of the semester and you will not understand what he's doing. Just amazing, amazing professor. Okay, so then, which of these methods?
How do you know which method is the best to use?
Very good question. Excellent. If factoring takes more than half a minute, forget it. Unless you're forced to use a particular method, right? If you're told in this particular equation you must use this method, then you have no choice. But if you have to choose, it's a perfect question. Here's how my thinking is. I'm given an equation, I'm not told which method to use. This is what I would do. If factoring takes 30 seconds, I will factor. If it takes more, I will not. Taking square roots, only if it's already set up for that. Something with x squared equals a number. Otherwise, I would never think of it taking square roots. Completing the square, never. Absolutely never, unless I'm forced to use completing the square. Quadratic formula works anytime. And it's easy. So if it's not set up for taking square roots, then I only have to choose between quadratic formula and factoring. If factoring takes more than half a minute, forget it. I will use it.
You can do the two quadratic formula.
You can do the quadratic formula anytime. For any quadratic equation.
So for that, just put your quadratic formula.
Of course. Yes, that's true too. The problem doesn't tell me what to do. It only is asking me to find the dimensions of the plot. If I use method 1 or method 3 or method 4, it doesn't matter because we're not specified. So then indeed, I will use the quadratic formula, negative 3 plus or minus b squared, which is 9 minus 4 ac. Notice that I changed, for simplicity, let's do this one more time together. Negative b, which is negative 3 in this case, plus or minus the square root. Please always make sure that this quantity is never, never, ever negative. Because whatever you have to square it. So it must be always a positive number. Now the rest says minus 4ac. But since c is negative, I already changed the sign into positive. So I don't have to use too many parentheses. Now I will.
You wrote plus 4.
Yes, because I have minus 4ac and c is negative. So I should have written minus 4 times 1 times negative 180. Instead of writing all this, I already changed this into plus because it's plus. Instead of putting so many parentheses in there. Now I want to show you how to do this with the graphing calculator because there is a way of putting everything in the graphing calculator and determining both answers quickly. And I would like you to see it. You don't have to use it if you don't want to, but you have to understand one thing and not forget. If you put this in the graphing calculator, you must have parentheses outside, and you must have parentheses inside the square root. Some calculators will work without. The sophisticated one or the new ones will work without. I don't recommend it though. Be careful. So the left parenthesis, negative 3 plus the square root.
It's not up there.
Oh, of course not. I'm sorry. Thank you. Sorry, my apologies. So 9 plus 4 times 180. Close the parenthesis, go outside, close another parenthesis, and then divide by 2. I'll wait for you to put it in, and then we'll press enter together. So when I press enter, I get one of the solutions. How do I get the other one? You go to second key, second and entry. Second and entry, the blue or yellow, whatever you have here, orange, second and entry, it will copy everything, go back and overwrite the plus into a minus. So you don't have to, I'm sorry?
Second.
Second and entry, yes. So go back. For me, it's a little bit more difficult with the software, but for you, it's much easier to go back and overwrite the plus into a minus, or change it into a plus, the plus into a minus, or overwrite it. And you get the second solution. Do you, something is wrong. So I'll be right there. So you don't have to use this, but I do not recommend doing it piece by piece and putting it together, because you increase the error. In this case, if there are natural numbers of integers, because one is negative. But if you put piece by piece, then in the long run you'll have a discrepancy.
So we can use all this on the test. We can use our
Sure,
calculator.
of course, yes, of course.
So, but then how will we show our work if
Okay.
we do it on a calculator? You don't, like, if we do it on a calculator, you're not gonna show it.
You have to show the quadratic formula,
That's what I mean.
and you put the answer like I did. So what I expect you to see on tests and the final exam is what I show you in class. I don't expect you to write anything extra.
So just
You have to show all these steps. You have to show this and show this, and you have to show the equation. You have to show this equation. You have to show the quadratic formula. But that it's okay if you write y equals 12 and y equals negative 15, yards and yards. One of these two is not acceptable. Which one is not acceptable? Right, so this is not acceptable. And then I have to determine x. And what do I know about x?
Just go back y and solve for x.
Exactly. So what is x then?
15.
Very good. So we will say dimensions, length, 15 yards, width, 12 yards. And that's the final answer. Any questions?
Yeah, I have one question.
Please, anything.